Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just jump right in today, because we are exploring one of the most breathtaking, comprehensive subjects in human history. A lot of times people look at the Bible and they just see this massive, complex collection of random disconnected books and ancient rules. But when you truly step back and look at the source material, it's actually one continuous, beautiful storyline. It's like a giant puzzle that fits together perfectly. It's this sweeping epic that tracks humanity's tragic fall, God's relentless pursuit of redemption, and finally, a promised eternal restoration. So today, we're digging into this incredible narrative arc, which we're calling God's master plan.
To make sense of it all, our journey today follows three major anchor points. It begins all the way at creation, with one woman in a pristine garden. It pivots entirely around a central, world-altering event at the cross, which is redemption. And it ends triumphantly with a glorious, redeemed bride in an eternal city, the New Jerusalem. Every single event in the source text points back to or looks forward to these three monumental shifts.
Section 1. Paradise Lost and Promised. To really grasp God's master plan, the text takes us back to the very beginning, to the perfect, unbroken fellowship of the Garden of Eden.
Now, the source text breaks down the tragic moment of the fall into three really distinct steps. First, the serpent questions God's word, planting that initial seed of doubt. Second, Eve actually listens to that deception. But step 3 is absolutely crucial. Adam knowingly disobeys. The text doesn't just pin this all on Eve. Adam was right there, and he willingly participated. This was totally a shared failure. Humanity, together, decided to choose independence and rebellion over trust. And with that one single decision, darkness and death spread across the earth.
Yet literally right after this massive failure, God announces a rescue plan in Genesis 3:15. Scholars often call this verse the first gospel. Right there in the dirt of the garden, God promised that the seed of the woman would one day step onto the stage of human history. He declared that while the serpent would manage to wound this coming Redeemer, the Redeemer would ultimately crush the serpent's head. The final victory was guaranteed before humanity even took its first steps outside of Eden.
Section 2. Human failure and divine plan. As the story progresses out of the garden and into the generations that follow, a very clear tragic pattern starts to emerge.
We see historical examples in the text illustrating this exact pattern. You've got Sarah, who grows impatient with God's timeline and gives her servant Hagar to Abraham to kind of force a DIY solution. Later, you have Rebekah, who relies on outright deception to secure a blessing for her son Jacob. The text isn't just picking on these specific people, it's showing us a universal truth. Humanity just kept trying to solve deep spiritual problems through our own flawed wisdom. Sin had completely infected every family tree, proving that our own human effort was never going to bring about salvation.
Which brings us to a massive turning point. Centuries later, the prophet Jeremiah signals a radical shift with this profound quote. The Lord has created a new thing. So what does that mean for us? It means God was finally taking the reins completely. The rescue mission wouldn't come from us just trying harder or being better people. God was going to accomplish what we never could. Salvation had to come by His sovereign initiative, completely independent of our broken efforts.
Section 3. The Cross and the Great Exchange. Here is where all of human history converges, at the absolute climax of this continuous story, fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ.
The source text describes this climax in 2 Corinthians 5:21, which says, God made Him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. Just take a second to let that sink in. This single sentence describes what theologians consider the single greatest exchange in the history of the universe.
Think about the actual mechanics of this great exchange. First, all of humanity's sin, rebellion, and brokenness placed directly upon Christ. In return, His perfect righteousness is completely handed over to us. Through this, the strict theology of God's justice is entirely satisfied, but at the exact same time, the deeply pastoral reality of God's boundless mercy is freely offered. It is the ultimate, undeniable demonstration of love.
Section 4. Babylon, Zion, and Transformation. As this narrative unfolds, it actually categorizes the entire human race into two very distinct kingdoms, symbolically represented by two women.
The text draws a razor-sharp contrast here. Babylon is the symbol of rebellion, of human pride, idolatry, and all these temporary, fading empires we try to build. It's the path we chose back in the garden. In contrast, Zion represents God's redeemed people, pursuing holiness and living under God's unshakable kingdom. And here's the kicker according to the source material. There is no middle ground. Every single human being ultimately belongs to one side or the other.
But the core message of this master plan is that you aren't stuck in Babylon. The text explains that when people receive Christ and step into that great exchange, their identity fundamentally changes. They are brought completely out of that old system of pride and into Zion. They literally become new creation, stepping into the roles of sons and daughters of God.
And the source material doesn't present this as just high-level, dusty theology. No, it claims this brings tangible transformation to everyday life. It shows that when someone steps from Babylon to Zion, broken people get put back together. Gripping fear turns into unexplainable peace, and spiritual death becomes vibrant life. This ripples out, guys. It transforms modern homes, it heals marriages, and it radically changes families for generations. The abstract theology becomes incredibly real.
Section 5. The New Jerusalem Restored. We now arrive at the grand finale of the text, where the story ends exactly where it was intended to all along, a greater garden city.
There is this beautiful, poetic symmetry in God's master plan. The first garden from Genesis, a paradise lost to death, is mirrored and elevated at the end in Revelation as the garden city, the New Jerusalem, its paradise fully restored. The curse that infected the earth is permanently removed, and the tree of life actually returns. But this time, humanity is completely secure, and God lives intimately and permanently with his people forever.
This ultimate victory is absolute. Death entirely eradicated. Tears and mourning, a thing of the past. And that ancient serpent who whispered lies in the very first garden is defeated for good. The darkness that so violently entered the human story in Genesis is finally, permanently wiped out by the light of God's presence.
So looking back at the full sweep of this timeline, the continuity is just wild. It starts with the promise in Genesis 3:15, moves to Bethlehem, hits its dramatic climax at the cross and the empty tomb, spreads globally through the church, and culminates in the New Jerusalem. It is recorded as the ultimate rescue mission, saving humanity from being the daughter of Babylon and transforming us into the daughter of God's kingdom.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've traced this continuous epic story, exploring the two kingdoms of Babylon and Zion, and the incredible lengths God went to through the great exchange to offer us a place in an eternal garden city. So the source material ultimately leaves us with a really provocative challenge regarding our own lives and families. Which kingdom are you building today? Thank you so much for exploring this incredible text with me. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you on the next explainer.